And we're live. Gonna have a refreshing sip of beverage while I wait for people to show up. Hello, everybody. While I'm waiting for people to join, I thought I would just show off my pretty sweet Fox Next Monster t-shirt. It's one of my faves. Let's see. We're pretty far along into however long this thing has been going on. I'm running out of t-shirts. My hair is getting pretty shaggy. I don't even know what day it is half the time. I was a little concerned even because I normally will post a reminder like a few hours out that people like maybe had forgotten about this, but I did remember finally to post a little promo for today's episode, and I was very pleased to see it was a picture of Theseus along with Would You Trust This Man? And I was pleased to see the chorus of Ew Grosses that came from. A little bit of spoiler for today. Before we get too far into talking about today's topic, as is my wont, I would like to share some of the different pieces of fan art that have been sent. This first one is really exciting. So we recently did an episode on the Minotaur. It was the one that was one I thought was lost, but turns out it was found, thank goodness. This is a piece of artwork from Maggie. And this is her version of, it's kind of like a World Wrestling Entertainment Federation sort of thing, version of the Minotaur. It's a great comic. I know this is reversed. There's some really funny details. Maggie, by the way, is a huge fan. She's one of my biggest fans. I know this because she has shown up to appearances dressed head to toe in a completely book-accurate version of Athena. She's also extremely funny. She's a very talented cartoonist. So it's the Minotaur wrestling competition, or Asterion, she puts in quotes, because that's his real name. There's some real nice slams at Theseus here. He's got a bad hairstylist. He's yelling, "I will destroy you!" He's got rip-off Zeus-style skirt. My favorite bit about this is the Minotaur's got his hands up, he's flexing, check out his abs. And he's saying no weapons, but like he clearly has a sword right in his belt. So this is a disingenuous Minotaur. Let's see what else we got today as far as some art. So last Friday, back when days had meanings, we did a session on some of the goddesses that haven't gotten as much focus and last week. And so Amphitrite, it was her turn today on Friday. Oh, guys, what's going on today? I'm sorry, I'll recover. So this is a drawing I got. Oh, it went blank. Let's get it back up because it's really cool. Check this one out. It's Amphitrite, but the artist actually used one of those silver metallic pens to do her skin because we were I had said how in certain texts it referred to the fact that her skin was like super like luminescent. Like they used this term like flashing. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like she was like super white skin, but like that's such a great idea that like I kind of want to take that idea. Like I might do that. This is by Ella. Ella, that's a great idea. Only problem is the metallic inked and printing is kind of an impossible. It's a lot of money. So, but it does look really cool. So Ella, that's a great idea. Like she's like that would explain the flashing whiteness. She's actually silver, like metallic, like the Silver Surfer or something. Let's see. Here is a drawing from Eleanor of Amphitrite. It's a very nice one. Again, really great energy. Eleanor, you're a very terrific artist. Eleanor also wrote in with a suggestion for this week that we do Hecate, because Eleanor, despite being, I think, only 5 years old, is super into dark goddesses. Hecate is a great choice for a little bit down the line. Maybe next week. This week, we're doing all heroes. I've already announced the first two. There was actually a clue for the third one in that picture I posted, and I think a few people maybe guessed who the third one will be. So then we have, I started sharing the artwork of this very talented fan who just writes, oh, I got her name now. She was just called Fan from Korea. We didn't know who she was. But her name is actually Yehi. I think I'm pronouncing it right. Yehi, if you're watching and I'm pronouncing it wrong, please let me know. She is another super talented cartoonist. I'm going to have to post these up online because reading cartoons backwards, because she actually is really funny. She's using designs clearly based on what you see in Olympians, but she's made these like really great little comics. There is one of hers I could show that you don't need to have any sort of guess, that you don't need to see the artwork for it. It's two-piece. This is a very famous painting of the trapping of Aphrodite and Ares by Hephaestus, like the way he's holding it. So Yehi did the Olympian style version. look at Hephaestus. He's all like, look at you. I love how angry Aphrodite looks. Like, her eyes are bugging. And she also very cleverly, I don't know if you noticed, she reversed the position. So in the original painting, Aphrodite's laying on top looking all like helpless, and she made Ares in the position there. So way to go, Yehi. This is great. Yehi, I'm going to write to you to ask if I could get permission to post some stuff on my Instagram, because I want people to see this. Let's see. Here's a couple more, and then we'll go on. Here's another Amphitrite with Poseidon. This one's pretty happy. I like this one. You know, I think like sometimes I really get into like some really kind of like downsides on these gods. As we're about to talk about Theseus, boy, let me tell you, I'm gonna get down on Theseus. But it's just nice to see like a nice Amphitrite. Also, great color scheme. Like the kind of the cyan outfit, the blue. We decided seaweed hair, I think, talking about it. But like the crabs having that pink hue, that's beautiful. So that is from. Oh, this is from Nora. Nora, hi Nora. So there's a lot of Noras that listen to this. So there's multiple Noras. This is Nora with an H, and yeah, I think that's everybody. There's so many other people's stuff I wanted to show. There's stuff I wanted to show from Megan, but I didn't have any of her stuff loaded up today. There's been more art than I can actually show, which is a good problem to have, because you people are all super duper talented. Just to remind you, if you decide that you want to send anything in, please send it to my email, georgeoconnorbooks@gmail.com. And if there's an episode that you missed in the past, go to my YouTube. You know, if you got some inspiration or stuff, like you can see all the episodes are up there, with the exception, I throw it every time just in case someone has it, of the first two, Apollo and Hermes. I'm going to have to redo those ones, but that's okay because they're two of my favorites, and I like talking about those dudes anyway. So, welcome to Hero Week. And hero, I'm using the term hero today. We use hero a lot. Hopefully we don't overuse it, because hero is a very important word in the English language. A hero is someone who inspires, who goes beyond the, what is needed, who does something that is like special, who saves people, who has a fount of courage or something that they do. They're above the rest of us. But the Greek term for hero, the ancient Greek term, was a little bit different. Or maybe it's more accurate to say their ideas of what constituted heroism were different. A lot of what we think of as Greek heroes today, some of their behavior can be considered pretty scandalous, pretty bad, actually. I often turn my mind to Achilles, who is the star of the Iliad. A lot of Achilles' behavior is very selfish and just awful. Like, Achilles is kind of a jerk, but he's considered like one of the greatest heroes of Greek mythology. Heracles has some bad moments. He's not as bad, but like the dude who takes the cake as being like the worst hero, like the worst person, in my opinion, is Theseus, who we're going to talk about today. And I'm just going to confess, when I was a kid, Theseus was my number one favorite Greek hero. Like, I was all Camp Theseus. I thought Theseus was awesome. He killed the Minotaur. The Minotaur was my favorite monster. It's like cool. And as I got older, and I mean, I liked Theseus so much. When I was in college, we had to do a project where we did, because I wanted to, do books, kids' books, what I'm doing now. And one of my projects one year, I did a kids' book all about Theseus. Couldn't find it, looking for it here. I think it's lost, but I did save like one piece. I'm going to post that up. Like, I did a kid's book about Theseus because I thought he was so great. But as you learn more and more about Theseus, there's a lot of things about Theseus that are kind of like, that's not so great. That's really not great at all. That's kind of awful, Theseus. You're kind of terrible. So let me pitch the case, if I may, for Theseus. Theseus is the hero of Athens. That's one of the reasons I liked him. My whole kids' book centered in the idea he was the thinking man's hero. Heracles was this big, dumb brute who was like, me smash stuff things. But Theseus, he was wily. He was kind of like Odysseus. I'm a big Odysseus fan. Also, he's got his problems. He's nowhere near as bad as Theseus, because nobody is. I like the characters who use their wits to survive, right? And Theseus, he actually is, he's very mighty. He's second in mightiness as far as heroes, probably only to Heracles. But he's pretty smart, but he's devious. He uses his brain for bad. And the first thing we should talk about, like, Theseus, right? Who is his dad? There's two different traditions. There is both the tradition that I personally subscribe to, Poseidon, god of the sea. And then there's a tradition where he is the son of Aegeus, the king of Athens. And I'll kind of talk about both and how they're interconnected and entwined and like why he has Aegeus as his father in some tellings. So here's the story, right? Aegeus was the king of Athens, and he was on a journey. He had actually gone to the journey. He had actually gone to the oracle at Delphi to ask for advice about something. And on his way back, he stays at like this friend of his in another kingdom. And this king has this very pretty daughter, and it's like there's a moment, and like her name, I should give her a name. Her name is Aethra. So Aegeus and Aethra are together. And that night, Aethra wakes up and she goes down to the shore. This is a seaside kingdom. And she swims into the waves. And there's this beautiful god there, Poseidon. And they're together. And then 9 months later, Aethra has a baby. Now, Aethra, I don't know if she even knew who the dad was. There was a couple of choices there. But basically, there was supposed to be a sign left for this child. Beneath a boulder that was such a powerful boulder, only the worthy son, such a powerful boulder, such a strong, heavy boulder, only the most powerful, worthy son could lift it. The father of Theseus left a sign for his son to find, whoever this father is. So Theseus grows up, and he's really tall and strong and has the bearing of a god, and he's gorgeous, and he can breathe underwater, and all these weird things about him, right? And then he goes, and he finally one day, he lifts up this rock, and this rock weighs like 5 tons. There's no way any human could lift it up, even if they're like super duper like well built. And beneath it, he finds the sandals and sword of Aegeus, the human king of Athens. So it's kind of a weird thing there, right? It's like, well, okay, that's not the dad I expected to have a clue under there. I expected there'd be like a little trident or maybe a bunch of fish or something, or like a sign that says, hey, I'm your dad, Poseidon. But it's actually something for Aegeus, right? And it doesn't make sense when you think about the story, because Aegeus is just a normal man. Aethra is just a normal woman. Their son should never have been able to lift up that rock if he hadn't been a divine being. And I think this is a trick by Poseidon. Because Poseidon, to throw this back, and I'm trying not to get too long-winded here because I have a lot to say about this. Poseidon, at the start of Athens, before it was even Athens, when they were competing to name the city, he competed with Athena, and she won. That's why it's called Athens and not Poseidonia. This is his long game. He basically sets it up so his son, Theseus, will eventually become the king of Athens. And this city that he has craved all his, well, not all his life, because he's, thousands of years old, and Athens is not at this point. But he gets to own this city because his son will be in charge. So he kind of puts it, Aegeus is his father. There's also this kind of belief in, you see it in ancient Greek stuff a lot, that maybe the Greeks believe that a person could literally have 2 fathers, like there would be like a mix-up stuff. We now know scientifically that's not possible. So there might have been the idea that maybe they were really both his fathers, but like his dad's Poseidon. Dude, come on, the guy's superhuman. His dad is Poseidon. So, as I show in my book, he's a little bit disappointed to see his dad's not actually Poseidon. I guess he doesn't put it together, or maybe he knows. But he's like, okay, so he goes to Athens. He's going to claim his birthright. And this is actually my favorite part of the story of Theseus, and it's not a part I got to tell in my book. I had to skip it over, because I tell Theseus' story briefly in Poseidon, but there's so much. Theseus is the second greatest Greek hero, like I said, second only to Heracles. There's a zillion myths about him. And his trip to Athens is pretty cool because, like, it's kind of like this weird travelogue where he goes, like, a few kilometers, and then he runs into, like, these different weirdo creeps. And it's like there's, like, one guy who has, like, an iron club, and he smashes people, and Theseus takes a club and smashes him. 2 of my favorites, I'm not going to get into because there's a bunch, and depending on the version, there's more. There's one dude who has this super long bed. Well, not super long. It's a bed, right? And he gets people, he's like, hey, come lay in my bed. And if you were too long for the bed, like if you were like a really tall person, he would take out a sword and cut the parts of you that hung over, like the top of your head and your feet, which is like, well, you're dead. And if you weren't filling the bed completely, the bed was a rack, he would stretch you out. So, of course, Theseus beats the guy, puts him on the bed, cuts him up, and, because Theseus. There's another guy who like tells people to look way over a cliff. When they look over a cliff, he kicks them in the butt and they fall down and a giant turtle eats them. Well, I mean, Theseus makes a giant turtle eat him. It's pretty cool. You know, I've talked before how I want to do books about the demigods and like minor heroes and stuff. I've actually made a pitch for this where I have 3 different stories in it about different heroes. And this is one of the stories. So a funny thing happened on the way to Athens, just like the story of Theseus going there. Because it's the only time we're going to be on Theseus' side after this. Because Theseus gets to Aegeus, he meets his dad. He gets to Athens, meets his dad Aegeus, and they're like, oh, his dad's so happy to see him. He's like, yeah, whatever, I don't care. My real dad's beside him. And Aegeus is like, well, you arrived kind of a sad time. A few years ago in a war, we lost to Crete, and every few years we have to send 7 men and 7 women to Crete to be eaten by the Minotaur. And Theseus is like, I'll go. And he's like, wait, what? We just got here. He's like, no, trust me, I'll go. So he goes. And there's a deal he says with his father beforehand, his father Aegeus. He's like, when I leave, well, Aegeus asks him, because Theseus is not thinking this way, because he doesn't care. But he's like, when you come back, please raise a white sail so I know that you lived. And you could set my heart at ease. And he's like, yeah, okay, Pop, whatever. He goes off. He goes to Crete. I've talked about a lot of this in the Minotaur episode, so I'm going to do it really quick. Basically, he gets the help of Ariadne, the princess of Crete, to help him navigate the labyrinth. The labyrinth is... You would just go in Labyrinth and die even if there wasn't a Minotaur in there. And my theory, of course, the Minotaur doesn't kill people because cows don't eat people. Why would a Minotaur eat people, right? He goes into the Labyrinth with the help of Ariadne, who gives him a string to hang on the door. He goes, he kills the Minotaur, and he leaves. And then he and Ariadne run off together because she can't stay there because her dad's like, really? You betrayed me and killed your half-brother for this guy? So they go into the ship to Athens. They stop off at the island of Naxos to replenish their supplies. And this is the first blow against Theseus, where I'm going to spell out why he's such a jerk. He just forgets Ariadne. This woman who surrendered her entire existence. She was a princess of the major power of the Mediterranean. And she betrayed her father, her family, her country. And he just leaves her on this island of Naxos, forgets about her, never thinks about her again. Luckily, her story picks up in Dionysus. Spoilers coming. Leaves her there, just a jerk. He's going home. He doesn't remember to change his sail. He sails into Athens with the black sails. His father sees him through a spying glass. Aegeus, I keep saying his father. Aegeus sees him. Aegeus flings himself off out of his palace into the water and dies because he doesn't want to live without losing his son who he just met. And then Theseus comes like, oh, guess I'm the king now. So suddenly Poseidon gets what he wants, right? So there we have Theseus now. He has had his grand adventures. He's the king of Athens. He's a wise ruler, right? He does good things? No, he's a terrible, awful monster. Some of the other things he does. Okay, so I already talked about Ariadne, right? This one's really bad. This is like the thing that made me realize, you don't know who Helen of Troy is? She wasn't Helen of Troy yet. She was Helen of Sparta at this point. Helen was the most beautiful woman in all the world, but she's not even a woman yet. She's a little girl. But she's born of Zeus, an immortal woman. Her beauty is going to be so great. And Theseus is like, she's going to be really beautiful one day. He kidnaps her. He kidnaps Helen as a little girl to wait until she's old enough that she'll be the most beautiful woman in the world. Because Theseus is a monster. Now, that's bad, right? Luckily, she ends up getting stolen back by her brothers, the Dioscuri, later. That's a whole other story. There's someday I should do a story about the Dioscuri. And that's not the only woman he kidnaps. He kidnaps Hippolyta, who's the queen of the Amazons. He kidnaps this woman, Phaedra. Like, he just, like, when Theseus likes a woman, he kidnaps her. So right there, creep, super creep, okay? So after he kidnaps Helen and he like locks her in a room, he's like, I'm going to keep you till you get older. Then this is one we actually mentioned in an early episode. I hope it's not one that got lost, but I'll retell it quickly. He has this friend named Theseus. And Theseus is, I think he's the king of the Lapiths, if I'm remembering correctly. Theseus is also a jerk. And Theseus actually helped him kidnap Helen. And Theseus is like, hey, I helped you kidnap your future bride. I want you to help me kidnap my future bride. Because they don't want to like date or ask people out. And Theseus is like, sure, I'll help you. I'm a total creep. And Theseus is like, I want to marry Persephone. And Theseus, who should have been like, Persephone is already married to Hades, one of the most powerful beings in existence, god of the dead. He doesn't say that. If he does, history doesn't record it. So they go down to the underworld. And they challenge, every great hero makes a trip to the underworld, right? Zeus did it, Heracles did it. You see this over and over. Orpheus does it, right? And he just plays music. Theseus goes down to the underworld. This is what he does. He goes with his friend, this lout, Theseus. And they're like, Theseus is like, we're here to take your wife. Which is like, first off, I mean, this one, Persephone's put up enough where people treat her like property. Hades has finally learned better, but they're still demanding her, and she's a goddess. Hello? She could curb stomp you guys. And so, like, Hades is like, okay, that's really interesting. Why don't you sit here and we'll have a brief talk about it? And they sit down and he's like, see you later, suckers. And he goes out of the room. They're like, wait, where did he go? And so they go to sit up and they can't. They're stuck. They're stuck to this bench. And that's actually where Theseus spends quite a while. During this time is when Helen gets rescued from him, thank goodness, because that's nothing good was going to come in that situation. And then eventually, Heracles, a real hero, making his trip to the underworld, he comes down there and he sees like his distant cousin stuck to a bench next to this jerk. And he's like, why are you guys sitting there? Did you die? They're like, no, man, we're stuck here. Hades tricked us. We're stuck. And he's like, well, let me see what I could do about that. And of course, you know, Heracles is really strong and he flexes and he cracks his knuckles. He grabs Theseus and as hard as he can, he pulls and he pulls and he rips him up. But he rips off his butt meat. A little chunk of, not a little chunk, like all the chunk that was stuck to the ground is still stuck on the bench. Apparently, this is a funny, like, kind of dig at Athenians. They were viewed as not having butts back in the day. They were very skinny there. So this is why, because he's the Athenian hero. He's the king of Athens, and he's got no butt because it got pulled off. They both try pulling on Pirithous, and as much as they can, they can't. So Pirithous, he's still down there now to this day, stuck next to a chunk of his friend's butt. So it's pretty awful, but, you know, they deserve it. So that's pretty bad. There's so much stuff about him. The Helen thing really killed it for me. Like, you can't, somebody who kidnaps a child, especially for that reason, that's disgusting. That's like awful. So how does he finally, he returns. I mean, he makes other appearances. He actually, in my book Apollo, he makes a brief appearance as a bad guy, as king of Athens, because he demands that Asclepius bring someone back to life. And that's what gets Asclepius killed. Like, if you encounter Theseus, it's probably a bigger likelihood. You know, I always say, like, just avoid the gods. Meeting Theseus is probably worse than meeting a god, like, because he's just bad. So finally, how does he end? What is the end of Theseus? I take some enjoyment in this one. In Plutarch, he wrote a book called The Life of Theseus. And so far as I've been able to locate, it's really the only account of how Theseus dies. So in his later years, the people of Athens are finally like, you know, Theseus is kind of a jerk, isn't he? They're like, yeah. And they actually run him out of town. He's deposed as king of Athens. His son takes over. I don't know if his son's a better. I should have read about that. And he goes to this other kingdom, Skyros. It's an island, I guess, but there were probably kingdom back there. And his friend Lycomedes is there. And he's like, Lycomedes, I've had a bad run of things. I need a place to hide out. And Lycomedes is like, yeah, come stay at my house. I have this special spot on the top of this cliff that no one will ever find you. And he's an old man at this point, Theseus. And he's like, oh, thank you. And Lycomedes shoves him off and he falls into the ocean. And this is how you know that everybody hated Theseus, right? First off, Lycomedes just straight up kills him. That's how he dies. He pushes him into the ocean. The ocean is where his dad rules supreme, right? Like, that shouldn't kill him, but it does. I think even Poseidon's like, you know what? Pretty much all my kids are horrible monsters, but you're really the worst. And I already got what I needed from you. My family line is still in Athens. I'm going to let you drown. And that's what happens. And that's the end of Theseus. It's pretty ignominious. It's a pretty bad ending. Spoilers, get used to this week. There's going to be a lot of kind of bad endings. We're talking about Jason. Should I just say who Fridays was? Here was the clue, right? The panel I showed to renounce this on Sunday, there was a picture of Theseus and a picture of Jason, and the panel cuts off. And it's a scene from the book Artemis, but it's specifically a portion of the story of Artemis where she's telling the story of a great female Greek hero, Atalanta. So Friday, I'm going to tell the story of Atalanta. So today, we're doing Theseus, not really a hero. Tomorrow, Jason. I like Jason. We're going to say some nice things about Jason. Friday, Atalanta. I have a lot to say about Atalanta, too. Now, I just realized I talked a lot and never once drew. And one of the reasons why is Theseus, as just, for the most part, he does just appear as a mortal man. So there isn't that much to do about him that's super distinctive. That didn't stop me, though. There was a few things I did. Let's see, make sure I center this well. I'm going to start off drawing just a face shot of him. Because one of the things that we know... Oh, no, I just disconnected it. Get on there. All right. One of the things we know about Theseus, he was very good looking. But I think we all know someone like this. I know it's never been a problem of mine personally, but some people are so good looking that they look like jerks. Like they're so good looking, they're not good looking. And that's kind of what I tried to do with Theseus. At the same time, trying to make him look a bit like his dad. So he has very similar eyebrows. If you watch the Poseidon episode, you know I talked about how the fact Poseidon's eyes, I draw as angry waves. His eyes are eyebrows like that too. He definitely spends a lot of time working on his eyebrows, shaving them to space and to shape. If this were in color, he would have eyes the exact same color as his dad. His dad has colors the eyes of the sea. This is a kind of shorthand I use to refer to him. You'll see in the text several times, the man with eyes the color of the sea. Spoilers, that even happens again in Dionysus. He's got the Athenian nose, not the Athenian nose, the Olympian nose. They all kind of have this nose. This is the hard part. He's got when I draw him sometimes, he has a really cruel smile. He wants, his lips are very thin, and if he smiles, his dad almost never smiles, Poseidon, but when he smiles, there's something no good. He has very much his father's jawline. I drew him clean shaven. Don't know why. I think a lot of the old sculptures from Greece, you see him actually as a clean shaven person, but then there's also vase paintings where he has a beard. Something about him says clean shaven guy. Now, here's an actual design element, something that distinguishes him a little bit. I did some reading on what the Athenian haircut was. Spartans famously had the long beard, for instance. The Athenians had this kind of haircut that's, at the time, the mythological time I'm talking about, it's kind of like a mullet. It doesn't look great, I'll be honest. I mean, some people could pull off a mullet. I guess he can. He's certainly better looking than me. So his hair is kind of short and spiky on top. I also try to draw it looking like it's kind of always a little wet. He has maybe a little bit too much of a receded hairline there. He's got good genes. You can't fault him that. There's his ear. I don't know why it looks pointy. And then it's kind of long in the back. This is actually probably the most friendly looking Theseus I've ever drawn. Because normally, let me draw a full body Theseus. Because in order to get the idea of Theseus, we need to, he is very godlike in his bearing. In his travels, and many of the accounts of his travels, you see people just kind of see him oh, you're like a god, or the son of a god, clearly. So when I drew him, he's enormous. He must be 6'8". And he's better proportioned than Heracles. Heracles is kind of a huge hulking brute, right? He's got enormous muscles. But he's not traditionally good looking, not in the same way we would think. I gave him the off the shoulder look that was actually popular in Athens back in the day. He's got skirt, long legs, which I didn't leave room for. Very long neck. Kind of looks, honestly, kind of looks like Apollo here, right? Just a really well-proportioned, muscular, tall, beautiful man. But as much as I come down on Apollo, at least Apollo never kidnapped any little kids. Also, he forgot about Ariadne. That's just such a creep move. This woman gave up everything in her life to help this guy, and he just totally forgot about her. And you could draw him with a sword or whatever, and that's Theseus. There's not a lot to say about. Oh, I forgot one thing. Also, whenever I draw his outfits, it's the color of the sea too. A little nods, but yeah, not my most exciting design. So I feel let me check my notes. I feel like I got everything I needed to say about him. Wasn't too nice to him. So if you want to draw your own Theseus and maybe say some, wait, that's the wrong one. Maybe even maybe you want to mount a defense of Theseus. Be hey, you know what? This is your opinion, man, but maybe he's not that bad. Write to me an email, George O'Connor Books, or you can see, the other old episodes here, blah, blah, blah. This is the part when I normally take some Q&As, some questions and stuff. If anybody has any questions or wants to mount a defense of Theseus now, or kind of jump on the dog pile that is Theseus is a big creep, please join in. We have some clapping here. Let's see if, that's people maybe clapping for Atalanta. Theseus need to get his, I'm not going to say that word because there's kids watching, but he did need to get whooped. The sheer audacity of Theseus, I will agree. Yeah. You know what? I'm going to say something a little bit in defense of Theseus. Honestly, if you were born with the powers of Theseus, like, he's not like God strong, but he's like Spider-Man strong. Like, you know, Spider-Man, like at least, right? Like, he's really strong. He's got abilities well beyond the important. He's super fast. He can breathe underwater, all this stuff like this. And you're gorgeous, and everyone's like, you're like a god everywhere you go. It's probably pretty hard not to let that go to your head, especially if your dad is completely absent. Like, you know, his mom, there's no reason to assume she's anything other than a good person. Oh, no, actually, there is a reason to assume she's not a good person. Because you know who watched over Helen after she got kidnapped? His mom. He kidnaps a child, says, "Ma, can you watch this kid until she grows up?" So, you know, Princess Aethra, you're probably pretty not great either. So, Theseus didn't have a good luck. What happened to Theseus' mom? I don't know. I should look that up, because I bet you there is some sort of story. But maybe, I mean, she might just be a character that slipped through the cracks. Maybe she was lucky enough just to die of old age and just never have to worry about that. But given that he was himself ousted from his kingdom, if she was still alive for that, like, it probably didn't end well for her. Is Odysseus a hero or a Nero? And Nero is spelled Nearo. So I guess that's like an almost hero. You did say Odysseus, right? Not Theseus. Yeah. Okay. Here's another week that's coming up. I'm going to do like an epic hero week where we're going to do Achilles and Odysseus and Diomedes, right? I love Odysseus. The Odyssey is one of my favorites. I've read it many times. But there might be a case made that he's not super heroic either. That if you really look at his heroic, he's done some impressive things in war. He certainly has the attentions of Athena. But there's not a lot of things you can point to, like, oh, like he's not the sort of guy to run into a flaming building and pull out, like, you know, a puppy or something, right? Not, who is in Greek heroes? I don't know. I'm going to get back to you, whoever asked that one, about if he's a hero or a Nero. Which classical author tried to rewrite Theseus' ditch of Ariadne? I remember reading somewhere that he had a vision telling him to leave her there. That's interesting. I could see how somebody would be an apologist for that because, okay, spoilers. He leaves Ariadne on Naxos, where she languishes for a long time. Months at least, probably years. And Naxos at this point it's a very nice island now, but at this point in history, it's uninhabited. And she stands on the beach. And then one day she hears like this lilting musical sounds behind her. And she is suddenly visited by Dionysus and all his Meneids and his satyrs and his drunken retinue. And she ends up marrying Dionysus, which, man, that is a big trade up. I mean, he's actually maybe like in the handsome sense, like a little bit better looking than Dionysus. But Dionysus, he's at least a sensitive guy and he can make you laugh. I wonder, but like, so the idea that like he was commanded by a vision there, I could see someone saying because it ends up better for her that she was Dionysus, or someone told him to do that. I don't know who did that. I'm going to actually research that because that, you know, it's possible it's not a classical author too. That stinks to me of something like Robert Graves would write. You know, something that was written later by like somebody who's retelling the story. But that's a great question. What do I think of Perseus? I hear a lot of people say he doesn't deserve his hero status because he got all the cool gear from the gods and didn't do much himself. Okay, I'm definitely guilty of spreading that line of thought too. So Perseus is the hero who his big deed, his main deed. He does a few other things adjacent to it. He killed Medusa. If you watch my Medusa episode, you know I actually feel like Medusa is very misunderstood. I lump her in with Minotaur. Like she what? Leave her alone. Stop going to her island. She's been cursed by the gods. Stop trying to cut her head off. Perseus is sent by the gods to cut her head off. And he's given the winged sandals and the sword of Hermes. Athena gives him this mirrored shield which he could look into so he doesn't have to see Medusa directly. And in some versions of the myth, she borrows the helmet of Hades, which makes him invisible and gives it to him. So he's flying invisible and he's been told how to do the whole thing. I joke about this, like even I could kill Medusa if it came down to that. I probably couldn't. I'd probably get turned to stone or crash into something. But yeah, his big heroic deed, he was held by the hand of the gods throughout the entire thing. Here's where I give him some credit, though. So he comes back, and when he's flying back over, with Hermes' shoes, because he's been left to fly, he sees the Princess Andromeda chained to a rock. She's the princess of Ethiopia, and there's this giant monster, Thesis, about to kill her. He takes the head of Medusa, flies down, turns Thesis into stone, and saves Andromeda. Which is actually, it's an altruistic act. Now, it might be that Andromeda's incredibly beautiful, and he was like, a chance to meet a pretty lady. But he did actually save someone. So yeah, I'm going to give Perseus, I'm going to give him hero status. He's not a Nero. He is a hero, but there's an asterisk next to it. Like the way some baseball stats, if the person used performance abilities, he had performance enhancing abilities there. Let's see. Are you going to do more Greek myth books after Olympians is over? Yeah, I think so. The plan is after the Olympians is over and it's nearly done, I'm working on the last book. I'm going to take a break from doing Greek mythology books to do a 4-book series called Asgardians about Norse myth. And ideally, as long as people still want to read it, because I sure still want to tell them, I want to come back and then maybe once a year do a Greek myth book. It wouldn't be called Olympians anymore because I wouldn't want them to be centered on the Olympians the same way Olympians is. I want to be able to tell all sorts of different stories. Tell the story of Theseus on the way to Athens. Tell the story, some of Heracles' other stories. I've mentioned some of these before. I'd love to tell the story of Bellerophon and Pegasus. I want to tell the story of Eros and Psyche and Orpheus and Eurydice. And there's a billion myths I haven't gotten to do. So I would ideally like to do that. Why did Poseidon have Theseus in the first place? Poseidon had Theseus. I'm pretty sure it was a calculated move on his part just to take over Athens. I kind of point out in my book Poseidon, all of his kids have a monstrous side. Some of them are actually born as physical monsters, like Polyphemus the Cyclops. Or they'll have a weird aspect, like Triton has the fish tail. There's always something a little bit off about them. And that doesn't necessarily make them bad people. But in the case of Theseus, his monstrosity manifested itself as he's kind of naked ambition. His whole thing is he only looks out for himself. And maybe by proxy, he does work for Poseidon. So he's an agent that Poseidon fathered and put into the world just to help him take control of the most powerful city in the Greek world. So I think that's kind of it. Let's see. So what poor woman ended up marrying Theseus after Helen made her escape? Oh, well, that's the thing. He just went and kidnapped Hippolyta, and then after that, he kidnapped this woman, Phaedra. And I think Phaedra was his queen at the time of his deposed... Remember how I said his son took over? So Phaedra is his queen after Hippolyta is rescued and goes back to the Amazons. But before she left, she'd had a kid with Theseus. Phaedra, his last wife, marries Theseus' son by Hippolyta, and they are the ones who overthrow him. So he's just, he's bad all the way down. It's like Turtles all the way down. Just bad Theseus all the way down. Can you please make demigods I think their mom or dad, in Percy Jackson? I'm not sure I understand. I couldn't understand that question. Come back to me in that one. How about a series on Egyptian gods? If you want to see my take on the Egyptian gods, they make a really brief cameo appearance in my book Hermes. Egyptian mythology has never sang to me the same way Greek and Norse did. Those were my two favorites. I've read books in Egyptian mythology. The gods always seem very distant and far away and remote and kind of unrelatable. The thing I've always loved about Greek mythology is, as awful as he is, I can relate to Theseus. We all know what it's like to be a jerk. We all know jerks like him. The Egyptian gods, the stories are always just a little bit so weird out there that I just never connected the same way. So I would love to see someone do something like the Egyptian gods, for the Egyptian gods, like what I did with Olympians. I don't know if it's me. Maybe... I hope somebody does a great comic retelling of them, because probably, I feel like the way to do it may be to go funny. They already have the heads of animals. Maybe push it. I don't know. See, I'm not the guy to do it. I would love to see someone do it, though. Maybe you. Do all heroes have a sponsor god or goddess? Huh. Tentative, yes, but that's a great question. I'm running through gods and goddesses, like heroes in my head. Right now, I'm having a hard time coming up with, I can't think of anyone. And I mean, doesn't hurt that most heroes are actually demigods too. There's very few of them who are just straight up humans. I think that is kind of a thing. I think they have to have divine favor of some way. I feel like otherwise, yeah, I think, yeah, great question. Wow. Did these heroes have longer than regular mortal lives? They're everywhere in all these quests and then still have time to join the Argonauts, the Argonautica. What's happening here? That's a great question. I actually wonder about that too. Because it would, if you try to like figure out like a timeline for some, like Theseus is pretty hard for this. Heracles is downright impossible. And I know, like, how did they have time to do all these adventures? Did they live longer? I mean, that's interesting thought, right? They do have they have Olympian blood, so maybe like it doesn't grant you immortality, but maybe it grants you an extended lifespan. I think regardless, they probably had exceptional vitality late into their years beyond what like at 70, I bet Theseus could still just crawl me. But like, he was still 70, but he looked like he was like maybe 40. I don't know that he would have lived much beyond 100 though. Like I feel like he still would have capped off. The real reason is a lot of those things, like I've mentioned this before, the ancient Greeks didn't have a Bible, right? They didn't have one set stories that was like this is codified. These are the stories. Basically every town had a story about a hero, and basically every town made that hero. Eventually it was Heracles, because you don't want to have like, the next town over they have a Heracles story, and our guy's Biff the architect. Who cares? So Biff the architect eventually became Heracles, right? And so like I think it was just like by accretion of stories, just like all these stories being told, and you want the same way like Zeus has so many kids. It's like, well, in Dodona, Zeus is like the father of their founder, and our founder is just like the guy who owns the bakery. And like you eventually want to match that, so you make your founder Zeus, the son of Zeus too. So I think it's just by way of, that's like the not fun reason. The real, let's just say they lived longer and they like had action-packed lives. Let's see. You mentioned Bellerophon. What are your thoughts on the post-archaic conflation of Chrysaor and Bellerophon? I don't know this. So Chrysaor is it's both the name of Demeter's blade, right? But it's also in some versions, like later versions of the retelling of Medusa. After Medusa's head is cut off, Pegasus is born from the body, and there's a second character named Chrysaor, who just kind of like just is mentioned, like, hey. Now, I didn't know that there was actually a conflation where people thought Bellerophon and Chrysaor were together, which would explain, I guess, something, because Chrysaor is the sibling of Pegasus. I'm going to have to look that up. That's an interesting question. Oh, someone says scroll up, please. So I must have missed a question. I missed a lot of questions. Wow, people have questions today. Let's see. I know that Shakespeare wrote in A Midsummer Night's Dream that Theseus and Hippolyta were married. Is that mythological truth? Yeah, that actually comes. I mean, he's very different there. He's the Duke of Athens, and it's, he's a much more sedate character. But if the Minotaur didn't eat people, how did he survive? Even if he did eat people, what would be the chance of him coming across one of those people? So how did he survive? That's a great question. Now, when I drew the labyrinth, and I think it's the only way that labyrinth makes sense given how windy it is, there had to have been open areas of the labyrinth, right, where it didn't have a roof. Because if he's just trapped in the darkness the entire time, completely enclosed, he'd probably suffocate. He would definitely die of vitamin G, lack of nutrition. There's parts that are open, and I feel like the labyrinth was so big and so convoluted and so impenetrable that it had different kind of like worlds within it. So I think some of the outside areas must have had grazing area for him. Because, man, I'm sure the dude, half cow, he definitely ate grass. I've mentioned this before in the story by Borges that I mentioned at the House of Asterion, or La Casa de Asterion. He does encounter those people sometimes, the Minotaur, and he like actually uses their bodies. It's unclear whether or not he kills them. At least last time I read it, it's been a while, so maybe he does straight up kill them. But he actually will, he'll remember something specific about that corpse, and he'll post it in a certain way in a room, so he himself, Asterion the Minotaur, has a way of judging where he's in the maze, because he's just as lost as everybody else. Let's see. Did scroll up. If I missed your question, please write again. I know it's not about Theseus, but what are your thoughts on the Aeneid? The Aeneid is a Roman epic poem. It's done. It's kind of like it's sometimes you hear it referred to as the third epic, though it has its genesis many years after the Odyssey and the Iliad, and it's certainly written in. Imitation sounds harsh, but like homage sounds not enough. It's written as what then was a modern epic, right? And it was written also like the Odyssey and the Iliad were referred to as like they were thought as Greek foundation stories, right? And the Romans, they wanted to have the same thing. And interesting, the Romans actually claimed descent from the Trojans. And the Aeneid is the story of Prince Aeneas, who is actually, I guess I'll use the Roman names here. He's actually a son of Venus, aka Aphrodite. And he escapes the sacking of Troy. Like you've seen images, it's in one of my books. He's like literally carrying his father on his back, and they're holding the sacred flame of Hestia that they brought out of the city, and his son's with him. And he goes and he founds the city that eventually will become Rome. It's pretty cool. It's a really good read. The Romans, I honestly like some of my favorite retellings of Greek stories are Roman versions. And I don't know if it's just because Roman is a little bit close, like Roman stuff tends to be a little closer in time. They write really well. They just tend not to make up new stuff as much. I complain about that. But the Aeneid it's an epic. It owes a lot to what comes before. And I think people tend to scoff at it that way. But it's a really entertaining read. I definitely like it. And I think it's really cool the way it kind of ties in. Like you visit like Polyphemus after like what he met Odysseus. There's like these, it's kind of like this greatest hits thing. It's kind of, all right, this is going to be a little bit, it's kind of like the Odyssey and the Iliad or the Godfathers part 1 and 2. And like the Aeneid is like Godfather part 3. Like it's years later, it's pretty good. It really didn't need to be there maybe, but you know, it's not bad if you really look at it in its own judgment. It's better than Godfather part 3. Let's see. Is this Theseus' only myth? No, Theseus has... I had to cut stuff short. Theseus has so many stories. A thing about Theseus, too, to understand, normally I really associate with the underdog. Theseus definitely suffers from being second best. He's definitely the hero who is second best to Heracles. And you can see how a lot of his stories come on later, and they're kind of things to match him up to Heracles. There's some accounts where we actually see like he has like his 6 labors. He fights a lot of the same monsters that Heracles fought on his labors, like that got let loose again. Like Theseus meets them too. His whole thing is like he's kind of like the Athenians really tried to pump him up. Like, hey, our guy's really great too. Rest agrees you can have Heracles, but we got Theseus and he kidnaps children. They probably didn't say that. Is Pegasus a boy or a girl? A boy. All 12 gods have kids like demigods, and well, no, that's actually, they don't all, because a lot of the gods don't. I mean, maybe we're talking Percy Jackson, maybe missed the first part, where I think he's found ways to make them have kids. But there's quite a few of the gods and goddesses, well, specifically, yeah, there's quite a few of gods and goddesses who don't have kids at all. Hades and Persephone, in most accounts, don't have any children. Hades is the god of the dead. It seems awkward for him to help create new life, right? Athena, no children unless you count Erechtheion, who is that's more Hephaestus' thing. That's a whole story I'm not going to get into here. Artemis has no kids, and Hestia has no kids. So, like, it makes sense if they were to have kids, they would have demigods. Demigods basically happen when a god has a child with a mortal. Immortal, not immortal, a mortal. And then you have varying levels of divinity depending on who the other parent is. Like all the Olympians, with the exception of Dionysus, have 2 godly parents. Some of them are 2 Olympians, like Ares. Some of them are like an Olympian and the child of a Titan, like Hermes. And there might even be a nymph in there too. No, I don't think there is, actually. I don't think nymphs count. But then there's Dionysus, who his mom is Semele, a mortal princess. He's like a new type of god. What is a myth that you will never tell in a book? There's a lot. I probably shouldn't say them here either, though. That's a good question. Hit me up later. What do the Greeks think of cats? Now, this is a question I'm happy to answer. As a person who loves cats, who has 3 cats, who actually, they've been pretty good today. One's sleeping right there. I don't know where the other 2 are. I love cats. And there's not a super amount of references to cats in Greek mythology. You'll see quite a bit of lions, which count as cats. Leopards, particularly, and panthers, that comes up a lot with Dionysus. That's like one of his special things. But like as far as like a normal, ordinary house cat, like I can barely think of anything. I have a little bit of a scene, because I'm such a cat person, that's come up in Dionysus, where we see Artemis profess her love of cats. It's a little throwaway line, and that comes from the fact that Artemis was associated with Bubastis, the Egyptian goddess of cats. And when like they kind of translate her into Egypt, that was the goddess that she was affixed to. So I'm like, okay, she loves cats. And I feel like Artemis she's a hunter and she loves wild animals. Like, yeah, she would love cats. Of course, she has a million dogs too, but I mean, it doesn't have to be a competition every time. Obviously, there is already overlap with Helen, but how does the storyline of Theseus time up against the Iliad? That's a great question, and it's something I used to stress about. Because you're kind of like, how many generations do these stories overlap? And I kind of worked out, so we know Perseus is on Heracles' mother's side, his grandfather. So Perseus definitely comes first, right? He's like a couple generations before. Then Heracles, I get the impression, and this may be just from the old Jason the Argonauts movie, that he was a hero for a while by the time Jason the Argonauts happened. So maybe that's like a fourth generation, but Heracles is still very vital and strong, but he's like maybe in his 50s at that point. And he joins them with the Argonauts, which is like Jason, and some versions Atalanta, and some versions even Theseus is on there, because like, hey, whatever Heracles could do, I could do better, and all these different Greek heroes. Then there is the overlap with Helen, right? Who's like a little girl. I don't know how little, but you get the impression she's pretty little. Because people got married pretty young back then, and she was still even too young for that. So, yeah, I don't know. Theseus is definitely dead by the time the Iliad rolls around. And just by the ways people talk about him, you don't feel like he just died a few years ago. You feel like it's a little bit of time. So I wonder if, like, somebody asked before if these demigods had extended lifespans. And I don't think that the Greeks really thought about it that hard. Like, I think for them it was always like a few generations past what we can actually remember this stuff happened. But maybe maybe Helen is actually a bit older than she looks. Instead of being like this young ingenue, maybe she's actually like in her 50s, but just still looks amazing, Hey, I'm saying people in their 50s don't look amazing. I'll be there soon enough. Are there any heroes whose stories don't end tragically? Is it something they deserve for some reason? Huh. Going in the list of heroes. Don't remember how Perseus dies. He might not die tragically. Jason ends kind of sad. Spoilers for tomorrow. Heracles ends sad. Atalanta ends sad. Achilles ends sad. Odysseus ends sad. Wow. You know what? I think, bigger answer to your question, I think it is... I think what happens invariably is the heroes commit an act of hubris. They commit an act of they let their head go to themselves, and like they kind of commit an affront to the gods. And it's one of those things. It's like the kind of constant push and pull you see in Greek mythology, where it's the idea where there's like we venerate these heroes, and some of these heroes literally become gods later. They're worshipped in cult. But there's also like it's very important they remember their place. And it seems like invariably they step over that line and they get shoved off a cliff, Theseus style. Yeah, somebody agrees with me. Perseus is the only one. But then there is that version. There is a version where a stone statue falls on Perseus. I don't think that's I think normally he's considered to have a pretty good end, but I think you're right. There is a version where a statue falls on him. That I feel like is an echo of what happens to Jason. We'll cover that tomorrow. No, Wednesday. Oh yeah, so yeah, the rest of the week. Wednesday, doing Jason and the Argonauts. And Friday, we're going to be doing Atalanta here at 3. So I think I got everybody's questions here. Thank you all so much for tuning in. This has been super fun. So like, again, just to remind you all, if you get a chance, like you do some art, I would love to see it. Send it to me, georgeoconnorbooks@gmail.com. If you want to see another episode you missed, please go to my YouTube, George Olympians. And thank you all so much for tuning in. And have a great day. I'll see you all on Wednesday. Bye-bye.